Shields up, Iron Breakers. Rurikhan here coming at you with another edition of the Conscast, and in today's episode we're going to be taking another deep dive into Anthem. This time we'll be focusing on loot and equipment, and I feel that it's important to mention that the Forge, which is where you will go in order to customize your javelin, has two different aspects to it. So you have on the one side the Loadout, which is where you'll actually go in order to select the equipment that you want to equip on your javelin that is going to affect your performance in the battlefield, and then you have the cosmetic side of the Forge, which is where you can go in order to change the look and appearance of your javelin, okay? And these two things do not directly influence each other. So basically, if you've been in the Forge for the past 10 hours or so, and I know that there's a lot of you guys that love doing this stuff out there, shout out to all the fashion hunters and everybody that practices fashion souls. Pretty much if you've been there for like the last 10 hours working on a set that you feel looks great, you don't have to worry about the next piece of gear that you pick up for your character destroying that set. That's not going to be a thing. However, I should mention that I am very concerned about cosmetics because we know that that is where they're going to be monetizing the game. And in the live stream that they did where they talked about appearance and cosmetics and they showed the extensive customization that they have for javelins, which I was actually impressed with the level of customization in there. They specifically stayed away from, disclosing how you will be able to unlock a lot of that cosmetic stuff in the game. And I know some people are like, well, but cosmetics is not really a problem because it's not going to affect your gameplay. But it's like the way your javelin looks, I feel, is going to affect your experience. I mean, not from a performance, not how much damage you're going to be able to do, but it does affect your experiences and, hey, I look really cool, you know? And I hope that they find a way to balance that out in a way that is fair. I hope that it's not just like, oh yeah, you want cosmetics? Time to hit up the shop and give us some money. I hope that's not the case, because they have mentioned that you will be able to unlock certain cosmetic stuff for your javelins, and again, the stuff that I've seen in the cosmetic live stream, I was pretty much blown away. Like the amount of customization that you can do for cosmetics in friggin' Anthem is insane, okay? Like, I thought it was really, really cool. But either way, let's start talking about the stuff that brought you this video, because in this video, I'm going to be focusing exclusively on loot and equipment. So the first thing we got to talk about is gear slots. So when you go to the Forge and you put up your javelin in there, you're going to have 5 slots in your javelin. One of those slots is going to be your weapon slot, which is going to allow you to equip 2 weapons. And then you will also have 2 ability gear slots. Now, the ability gear slots have different names depending on the javelin that you have equipped. So in the case of the Ranger, those would be grenade gear and assault launcher gear. And the Colossus, it would be the ordnance launcher and the heavy assault launcher. And then Storm would be blast seals and focus seals. And an interceptor would be assault systems and strike systems. So there's 2 of those, and the reason I call them ability gear slots is because the equipment that you equip on these slots is going to essentially be what gives you abilities in the game. So for instance, this is how you get your explosive mortar in Colossus or the lightning strike in Storm. So you're going to have 2 of those slots in order to equip 2 more pieces of gear. Then there's going to be a component slot where you will be able to equip up to 6 components. And finally, a support gear slot where you will be able to equip 1 piece of support gear. Now, the things that you can equip within these slots is going to gradually unlock as you level up your pilot. So basically, a level 1 pilot is not able to equip 6 components. I don't know exactly how the progression is going to be with that stuff, but I do know that the more you level up, the more stuff becomes available to you, the more things you'll be able to unlock. But basically, what we're talking about here is when you get to max level, you'll be able to equip 2 weapons, 2 ability pieces, 6 components, and 1 support piece of gear. This is your loadout, and you will be able to save multiple different loadouts in order to optimize yourself for different situations. Essentially, it functions kind of like your builds. Now, the cool thing about this is that you'll also be able to assign it like a certain appearance profile, so you can save a loadout with a specific cosmetic look. So you can have like, hey, this is my super offensive loadout. It's all painted red and stuff, because that's cool. Or here's my support loadout, and I painted it white. You know, it's just a little side thing, but I do do think that it's cool that you can save those two things simultaneously. So now that you know all of the different pieces of gear that you can get, let's actually talk about getting that loot. Now, as you are out and doing missions or doing free play or whatever, whenever you actually get loot, you're not going to be able to immediately equip it. It is going to be required for you to go back to Fort Tarsus in order to identify the loot that you've received so that you can then equip it. Now, the main reason that they're doing this, I'm assuming, is because you don't want that one friend of yours that whenever you guys are in the middle of the action is like, guys, I totally just picked up this new rifle, dude. It's amazing. Let me compare it with my other one. And like you and your friends are just like dying repeatedly and reviving and trying to like kill everything while this other dude's just like sitting over there far away from the action, like still looking over the stats of his two rifles, trying to figure out if he actually wants to equip the new one. Nobody wants that, and we all know there's always that one guy. I'm gonna call him friggin' Lab Rat Lewis, okay? Nobody wants Lab Rat Lewis in their friggin' party, and you know that everybody has a friend that is just like Lewis. Lewis is sitting over there looking over his loot the whole time. You guys are killing stuff, and Lewis is just like, no, man, I gotta look at my loot, man. Loot Lewis, man. Nobody wants him in his party, so they completely got rid of Lewis, and you all have to go back to town in order to identify loot. In my opinion, that's a really good thing to do. It's like, look, just focus on the action, focus on actually playing the game, and then worry about the rest of the loot. Now, loot is going to come in 6 different rarities. You're going to have common, uncommon, rare, epic, masterwork, and legendary. The quality and rarity of the loot is going to scale with your pilot level and with the difficulty of the content that you are running. So basically, the higher level you are, the better gear you will get, not only just in quality, but also in rarity as well. And then if you are working your way up the higher levels of difficulty, so like Grandmaster 1, Grandmaster 2, Grandmaster 3, the chance of you getting more rare and better loot also increases, okay? Now, despite the fact that Anthem has a gear score, very much kind of like what you had in Destiny and World of Warcraft and other titles like it, the gear score does not actually influence the quality of the loot you are getting. The only thing that influences that is the difficulty of the content that you are running, as well as your pilot level. And I'm pretty happy about that, because one of the things that I've always hated, for instance, in Destiny, is whenever you are getting up to certain certain light level thresholds, it would always be a bummer, because you would be constantly getting garbage loot that would be barely an upgrade, and then suddenly, once you would get like 1 or 2 light levels, it's like everything that you would get after that would be friggin' amazing. So there were these lulls as you were getting up to the soft caps of light level, which were annoying as hell. And I'm hoping that that is not going to be a thing in Anthem, because your gear score is not going to influence the quality of loot. Now, each piece of loot that you get can have up to 4 inscriptions. So these are going to be modifiers that are going to give you bonus on certain things. Like, can have some that's like, hey, this will give you plus 5% rifle damage, or this will give you plus 5% cooldown on your abilities, or something like that. Now, the one exception to this is going to be components. Components are going to be limited to 2 inscriptions, and the reasoning behind that is because you are going to be able to equip up to 6 components. Imagine the balancing that they would have to do around someone having 6 different components equipped, each of them with 4 different multipliers on there. You could just get to some really crazy builds. So they limited components to 2 inscriptions, and the rest of the gear is going to have up to 4 inscriptions. The number of inscriptions in an item is going to depend on its rarity. So in the live stream where they talk about gear and progression and all of that stuff, I went back and I looked at some of the items that they show, and when you have rare items, you got 2 inscriptions on them. Epic items can have up to 3 inscriptions, and then you have the masterwork items, which is where you will see the actual 4 inscriptions, which is like the maximum number of inscriptions that an item can get. Now, the cool thing about masterwork items is that depending on their quality, they might also include a special property for a certain item. Now, masterwork items work almost like legendaries for Diablo, so these are probably going to be named items. So say, for instance, you might be able to pick up the Colossus Mega Mortar or something like that, right? And that will have your 4 inscriptions, as well as an additional property in there that is going to be the same for every version you pick up of the Colossus Mega Mortar. The rest of the inscriptions, however, are still going to be random. So you can pick up a Colossus Mega Mortar that has increased 5% explosive damage and +2 to loot pickup radius, or another one that has reduced cooldown on every ability of your Colossus. You know, it all depends. But the special property will always be the same for that specific item. I know, kind of weird. Either way. Then you also have the legendary tier, but I haven't really seen legendary items. They, at least on that particular stream, they only showed masterwork items, but they do say that legendary items are going to be more powerful, deeper inscription pool, which I assume is going to be better. Anyway, on those inscriptions, you will not be able to re-roll them. So if you get a certain item that has a bunch of inscriptions and you don't really like them, too bad. You're going to have to make do because you're not going to be able to reroll them. Now, if you are crafting an item, and we will talk more about crafting further ahead, you can just recraft that item as many times as you want in order to get different inscriptions out of it, assuming that you have the necessary materials. Now, when it comes to loot tables, things get a little bit weird. When I talk about loot tables, I mean like, so for instance, can I go farm this specific weapon on this specific stronghold? And it doesn't seem like that is going to be the case, but at the same time, I'm not 100% sure. Because in that same live stream, at one point they say, there are no loot tables, any enemy can drop anything. And then you go further into the live stream and they say, there will be loot tables. And I was just like, well, now I'm confused. And then later I saw a tweet that I couldn't find ahead of this video. I'm sorry about that. But I know that I saw a tweet, and I don't know if it was Ben Irving or Mike Gamble, but one of them said that there were no loot tables, so anything can drop anywhere. And at this point, I'm just confused. So I don't know if you will be able to farm specific strongholds to get specific gear. All evidence indicates that that is not going to be the case. So I just don't know. There is, however, a chance of you getting certain specific loot by doing certain challenges. So say, for instance, kill 10 enemies with one single mortar strike. That might be a challenge, and you will be able to get like a specific piece of loot out of that. But naturally, the loot that you will get out into the world, I think, is always going to be more powerful. At least that's what I would imagine. And before you guys ask, no, you cannot trade loot with other players, even if they were there when the loot dropped. They want you to be, they want you to be getting that loot. They want you to be out there getting that loot yourself and not getting carried by other people, essentially, is what we're getting at. So now let's talk about crafting a little bit. Anthem is also going to have a crafting system. It is my understanding from the live stream, again, this is just data that I'm collecting from live streams and tweets and stuff like that, that the crafting system only goes up to the epic rarity tier. So that means that masterwork items, at least I think at launch, you will not be able to craft those, but that is what I get from watching the live stream. I could be wrong. This is not like written in stone somewhere, but I think that crafting is only going to go up to epic rarity, at least on launch. You know, after launch, who knows? Things can change. So basically, that only going up to epic means most likely it's meant to complement the loot that you are getting and not replace it. So for instance, maybe you've gotten, I don't know, 5 components that are masterwork, or maybe you have like 4 components that are masterwork, then you have like 2 uncommon ones. You can use the crafting to supplement that by crafting 2 epic components, assuming that you picked up a recipe. Or maybe you just really want a specific weapon and you haven't gotten one, you can get an epic rarity version of the weapon type that you want through the crafting system, okay? But again, the best loot appears to always come from you doing stuff out into the world and completing strongholds and doing stuff like that. You're going to be encountering nodes of materials throughout the world. You'll be able to harvest these nodes, and you can also get more materials by scrapping items that you do not want. The crafting recipes that I've been talking about, when you do get them, they're going to scale with your pilot level. So once you picked up a specific crafting recipe, and say you picked it up at level 5 for whatever reason, you will be able to craft a level appropriate version of that once you hit max level. Whether or not it's going to be particularly useful, that remains to be seen. So after all of this, I'm going to be giving you guys my personal opinion on how I feel about loot in Anthem. And my biggest fear is that it is going to be too RNG dependent, which in the long run is probably going to cause a lot of players to burn out and to get out of that gameplay loop. Because, I mean, imagine you getting the legendary version or the masterwork version of an item that you've been grinding for the longest of time, and then when you finally pick up that item, it is going to have inscriptions like, oh, this item increases loot pickup radius by 2% and increases how much materials you get by harvesting a node by 10% or something. And you're just like looking at it and you're like, where's my damage modifiers? I want to deal more damage. I want to have more resistance. I want something that actually affects my gameplay, not loot pickup radius and node harvesting. I think that is going to be very frustrating, but I think this is also going to depend on how well the loot is balanced. Like, how often does stuff actually drop? What is the chance of items getting undesirable inscriptions? So this is all in the air. I'm just telling you that usually when games depend too heavily on RNG, things get really, really frustrating. At least for me, I tend to become really frustrated when there's so much RNG, because do remember, we're talking about picking up items that are going to have 4 random modifiers in them. And those modifiers can either be really, really good or really, really bad, okay? And that's just the thing. You're not going to have that much agency in deciding what modifiers you're going to get on that item. So I guess it all depends on how much those modifiers are going to influence your gameplay. So like, say for instance, I pick up a weapon and it's got like plus 10% explosive damage for my mortars. That's going to be amazing, because I'm probably going to be using a lot of mortars because I want to play Colossus and have mortars. And then a friend of mine who is also playing Colossus picks up that same weapon, except it's got plus 10% to node harvesting. You know, he's going to be really fucking frustrated, I'll tell you that right now. My biggest thing here is I would like to be able to influence the items that we can get. I would like to have some kind of agency in that. And at least on launch, it does not seem like that is going to be the case. One of the reasons I actually stopped playing Destiny 2 is because I couldn't get a specific, like, I don't even remember the name of them, but it was like one of those things that you used to modify certain pieces of gear, and I couldn't get one that would do a specific thing for my Titan, and it frustrated me to no end. Like, every day I would go up to the Cryptarch dude, I would disenchant a bunch of blue shit in order to try and get this one thing that I needed to fully optimize my set, and I could never get it. And that was it wasn't the only reason. There was a lot more reasons why I stopped playing Destiny 2, but that thing really frustrated me. And one of my biggest disappointments for the last time that I played World of Warcraft was that I had virtually no agency whatsoever in the loot that I was getting. I lost count on how many times I would run the same dungeons over and over and over again, trying to get specific pieces of loot. And essentially, whenever you got to the end of the week and you were opening the Mythic Plus chest, and if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, think of it as like a loot box that you would get for doing dungeons in World of Warcraft. Every time that I would open that box, it would just be filled with disappointment. I'd be like, this is not the item I wanted. It would be pulling one item out of a loot pool of like hundreds of items. And I wanted, like, I don't know, maybe I could have wanted like 20 items, and I never once got a single item that I wanted out of that thing. And I ran so many friggin' mythic dungeons. It was insane. And then you have my biggest gripe with Monster Hunter World, which is the Kulve Taroth encounter, which is the most random thing ever. You go in there, you beat the crap out of one of the bosses of the game, which is not even hard. It's a super easy encounter. You get in there, you beat the crap out of it, and then you get to the end, and it's just complete random loot. It's complete RNG, and it's extremely frustrating. And what I'm saying here is RNG is fine for you to have some fun with it, but when you really want to get serious about a game, I feel that you need to be able to plan and have certain goals. Like, I want to be able, okay, I want to do this thing because I know that this thing gives me a chance of getting this other thing that I want, and that's why I'm doing this thing to get that other thing. And if everything is random, like I understand, they want to keep you on that treadmill and all that stuff, but it's just, I don't know. Again, the thing here is it's all going to depend on how well the loot is balanced. Because, for instance, Diablo 3 seems to work for most people because of the sheer amount of loot that actually drops. Eventually, from all the loot that drops, people end up getting the stuff that they want. So if that's the way that they're going to do it on Anthem, so it's just like there's going to be loot coming out of every pore of the monsters that we're killing, maybe it will work. But if you're going to get loot few and far between, that could become a serious problem. But again, that's just one of those things that you can only really get an idea of how good it is going to be once we actually get our hands in the game. What do you guys think about loot, equipment, all that stuff in Anthem? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit it up with a like, and if you like my content, subscribe and hit the bell notification icon. See you guys in the next one.